Next speaker is a very experienced decentralized blockchain developer that is currently working for BTCX, and I have the stairs on the other side. BTCX, which is Sweden's largest cryptocurrency marketplace. And not only that, he's also a speaker, teaches the technology aspect of the blockchain. So please give a warm hand to Viktor Tigerstro. Woo! Please. What an entrance.
All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, this is on. All right, great. So, hello, everyone. My name is Viktor Tigerstro, and I'm working at BTCX as a consultant, but I'm consulting through a company called One Agency, if I can get my picture up. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is why we need cryptocurrencies in a decentralized blockchain if the decentralized blockchain is to function. And this is whether or not we are using applications that are involving currencies or not. And we need to show a scenario here where we can prove that this is the truth. So, what does a blockchain actually do? Well, to make it simple, we want to enable a system where we can do transactions between different parties. We have Alice here that wants to send something to Bob. When you do transactions, your first thing that comes into mind is that you send something called a coin or a money or something of value. I want you to think broader than this, though. You can also send something else. The currency that we are sending can represent, for example, a stock or a fingerprint of a document that would, in this case, show that Alice acknowledges that this document exists at this time, and we can also be ensured that this document actually did exist at the time of the transfer, as the fingerprint cannot exist without the document. But for simplicity reasons, we are going to keep this of speaking about coins only. So, what we want to enable is a system here where we can do this kind of transfers. And if we can agree that Alice can send a coin to Bob, we can also agree that in the next transaction, Bob has the right to send this coin to Charlie. If we can agree on this specific conditions, we could also agree that since Alice has already spent the coin and sent it to Bob, she does not have the right to send the same coin to Dave in a later transaction. We can achieve this if we can actually agree on the transaction order. If we cannot agree on the transaction order, there is no difference between these two transactions. But if we have this order that Alice first has sent the coin to Bob, we can agree that she does not have the right to send the same coin to Dave later. This, in technical terms, is called a double spend. Now, what we want to achieve is to do this in a decentralized way. What do I mean by decentralized? I mean that we build a system where nobody has to trust anyone else. And I mean that anyone can send a transaction as long as they have the right to do so, and the right to do so is that they have something to send in the system. In traditional systems, like in the banks, we would require that the bank keep this order of transactions for us. So, what we want to do is to actually create a system where we don't need to trust a third party, like the banks, but be able to achieve the same thing. Now, this is actually a much harder problem to solve than what first might meet the eye. And the reason for this is that you need to solve a very known computer science problem called the Byzantine generals problem to solve this issue. And what is the Byzantine generals problem? Well, the Byzantine generals problem is a generalization of another problem called the two generals problem. And I'm going to show this to you through my amazing editing skills. I think you will understand why I'm a programmer, by the way, but okay. We have two generals here, and we have a city. The city is located in a valley, and the generals are located on two different sides of the city. Now, what the generals want to do is that they want to attack the city, and they want to occupy it. Both of the generals have agreed before that they will attack, but they have not yet agreed on the time that they will attack. However, they can communicate, but this was long before the time of cell phones, so all they have to communicate is a runner. So General 1 here can send a runner over to General 2, so General 1 could tell the runner, okay, tell General 2 to attack at 6 p.m. tomorrow. The runner would then run through the city, tell General 2 that we are going to attack at 6 p.m. tomorrow, and if we can achieve such a thing, then the attack will be successful. So, let's try this. The general tells the runner that we will attack at 6 p.m. tomorrow. However, when the runner runs through the city, of course there is a catch. The runner can become caught. And if the runner becomes caught in the city, it will never reach the second general. And what would happen in that scenario? Well, the first general would think, okay, I've told the second general that I'm going to attack. So the first general will attack, but the second general has no idea of what's happening. So the attack will fail. Okay, so we need to rethink. How could we actually solve this problem? Let's try this instead. Okay, so we send the runner, and when the runner has reached the other side, we get a confirmation from the second general. Okay, I received your message, and then the runner runs back. So let's try this. The runner runs over. It's actually successful this time. It turns around, but now it gets caught on the way back. What would happen in this scenario? Well, the second general thinks that we are going to attack, but the first general is still waiting for the confirmation, and therefore the attack would fail. And unfortunately, no matter how many confirmations you ask for, no matter how you do, you will never reach a solution to this problem. And this problem actually have a formal theoretical proof that this problem cannot be solved. So what is the Byzantine generals problem that I kept talking about before? Well, the Byzantine generals problem is a generalization, and instead of having just two generals, we have multiple generals. And there's one other slight difference, and that is that the generals can also be corrupt and try to spread misinformation between the generals. And why is this important? Well, what do these generals want to achieve here? They want to agree on a time. What I talked about before was that we wanted to achieve a system where nobody needs to trust anybody, but we want to agree on the transaction order and the transaction history. You see, it's just the same problem, but represented in another way. So in order to achieve this thing, you need to solve the Byzantine generals problem. And as the Byzantine generals problem is a generalization of the two generals problem, it is impossible to solve the Byzantine generals problem also from a theoretical standpoint. But what did we want to achieve? Well, we want a network where we can achieve a transaction history that we all know is correct. And if you think about the internet, it's the same thing. Instead of generals, we have different computers. And we don't know which computers are corrupt. We don't know even which computers or which parties are behind the different computers. So how do we solve this? Everyone thought this problem was unsolvable until 2008 when the Bitcoin white paper was released. So what did the Bitcoin white paper do differently? Well, the Bitcoin white paper presented a solution that built on something the theoretical proofs cannot take into consideration: financial incentive. So, Bitcoin solved this problem by having a practical solution that involved a financial incentive. And this is why you need a cryptocurrency for the systems to work. I'm going to explain more why this is. But think of it this way. What we want to do here is to build a system where we have a financial incentive for the different parties to be honest and present a correct transaction history, and we want to give a financial disincentive for the parties to be dishonest. What Bitcoin did is that Bitcoin presented a game, you could call it a game, where the game is a large lottery. And in order to buy tickets for this lottery, it's a pretty special lottery, you have to spend real resources, namely electricity and hardware. And the more electricity and the more hardware you spend, the more tickets you get. And of course, in a lottery, anyone can win. But with the correct, or with more tickets, you have a bigger chance of winning, of course. So, what we wanted to achieve is a big lottery where the winner spends real resources to participate. And if they win, what do they win? Well, they get the right to be the party that writes this transaction history. And this lottery is special in such a way that every 10 minutes one winner is said, or actually picked rather. And when this winner wins, this winner gets to choose which transaction it writes into the transaction history. And if the rest of the network agrees that these transactions are correct, the winner gets rewarded. And what does the winner get rewarded with? Well, the winner gets rewarded with a native value token. In Bitcoin, this is Bitcoins. So the winner receives Bitcoins for presenting or writing the transactions into the transaction history. And this is not a small amount of Bitcoin. Currently, the reward for doing this is worth somewhere around $100,000 or something like this. So when you present the actual transactions you want to include in the transaction history, you make sure, or you are rather financially incentivized to present correct transactions. Because if the rest of the network disagrees with you that these transactions are not correct, you will not receive this reward. And if we think about this, so the node or the party up to the right presented these transactions. What would the party beneath it get for actually accepting these transactions? Well, we have to understand that these parties also spending real resources to try to win the lottery, and this party wants something back for actually spending these resources. And if the party knows that I might win next time, this party knows also that I can get something back if this system has correct transactions, because if that happens, I get something of value when I win. So the network will have value if the transactions are correct, because the token you have within the system has a value. And if we, for example, did this instead, that the party would present an incorrect transaction history, the other parties are financially disincentivized to not agree with the transaction that this party is presenting, as they would lose value for the next reward that they might win if this transaction history includes transactions which are incorrect, because you cannot trust the system anymore. So, then the obvious question becomes, what happens if we would remove this value token within the system? Well, if we did, we're back to square one. We need to solve the Byzantine generals problem, because what solved it this time was the financial incentive, that you receive something back for presenting the correct transactions. And if you remove the financial incentive, you are back to square one, and therefore you cannot solve the Byzantine generals problem, and you can't agree on a transaction history. So, without the cryptocurrency in the system cannot function. And what I want you to remember is that even though the transactions might involve a cryptocurrency, we can program them to do something else. So then the obvious question also becomes, why would we even want a cryptocurrency? Or rather, decentralization. Because I keep talking about decentralized systems. Well, first of all, like you saw, a blockchain is nothing more than just a transaction history. What's new about the blockchain is that we can achieve this transaction history in a decentralized way. And for a business, what values might this bring? There are several different values, and there are too many to mention in this short time. But one obvious value to me is that since everyone can participate in these systems, no party has any more power than the other parties. And therefore, the systems become truly borderless. So you can participate from any part of the world, no matter where you are. If you're in Sweden, doesn't matter. If you are on the other side of the world, it doesn't matter. You're the same, you have the same power and you have the same authority to do transactions on the system. And therefore, if we as a business launch a project that runs on a blockchain and can get customers on a blockchain, we open up the market to be global instantaneously, as the systems are borderless. This is, from a business perspective, interesting, but one aspect that I think is even more interesting, and what got me so excited about these systems a couple of years ago, is the financial aspect. We're 7 billion people in this world. It's easy for us to think that people have the same financial access as we do here in Sweden all around the world. Unfortunately, this is not true. 6 billion people have a limited access to the financial systems, where 2.5 billion are estimated to be completely unbanked. This is driving people into poorness because they cannot access the financial systems, and they are trapped within their own worlds, and the only thing that could help them is access to the very systems they cannot access. Unfortunately, one would think that the traditional financial systems is expanding to include more people in the world, but this is simply not true, as they are actually becoming more and more restrictive, which the stats points to. And if we think of it that way, we have a chance here, since these systems are completely borderless, to create a global system where everyone can participate on the same terms. Why is this? Well, it's because everything it takes to actually participate in these systems is access to a device that can generate a number. And when I say a number, I literally mean just a number. That's all you need to participate on the system. And you also need a device that can do some simple mathematical functions to this number. But what you then can notice is that all we need is a device that can use this number in a few different mathematical functions. What kind of devices can we use for that? There are several different devices, but one obvious device would be a cell phone. And actually today, already 5 billion people are estimated to have access to a cell phone. And this number is, of course, expected to grow in the next coming years. Now imagine if this cell phone could turn in to the access to the very financial system that these people so desperately need. This is at least the future that I see and the future I work to achieve. With that, I would like to thank you all for listening to what I had to say. And if you have any questions or are just curious in general, please come and see me out at the lounge or speak to one of my great colleagues in our lounge in the middle of the center. Yes. Thank you.